Hello guys and welcome back to Car Obsession. Once more you join me with Monique, my Mark 1 turbocharged MX-5, and in this video I'm fitting a Wilwood big brake kit. So after doing the last two track days, both of which were at Snetterton, I found that after each one my front pads that have been left over were non-existent. So I thought, yeah, now that she has got a lot more power, it's really time I should think about upgrading her braking system. So I bought this kit from Boffy Racing. A big up to them. Their customer service is fantastic and they are willing to put up with my constant and persistent questions and my just my general queries. So a big thank you to the team at Boffy Racing. And of course in today's video I'm going to be fitting the kit. Now although I am in a workshop, I do have the luxury of working in a car repair garage. My disclaimer is this: I'm not a trained mechanic. I'm part of the office staff here, so I'm a hobbyist at best. So this isn't strictly a how-to video, but if you do learn something in this video, then of course that is a bonus. As I go through the build, the replacement, and we'll talk through what's included in the kit, but just to give you a brief overview, of course you've got new bolts, new washers, you have new mounts for the calipers. So if I just grab one here, I was going to say here's one I made earlier, but I obviously didn't make it. So you have these black brackets in which you can fit the new pistons, so the new calipers onto, but that does lead me onto pistons. So the standard setup on the Mark 1, you've got a floating caliper each side with just one piston. Now, for a standard car, that's just fine. Even if you're going to track your MX-5, I would argue if it's naturally aspirated, therefore you've not mucked about with power, then the standard setup with the good set of pads is sufficient. And I thought that would have been sufficient for Monique, but not quite. Now that she's got more power, the more power you have, the more power you need to stop. So, to replace the OEM calipers, I have these 4-piston Wilwood calipers. There we go, got the Wilwood writing just on the side there. Now, you may have noticed they are a little bit grubby. The reason for this is my second attempt at filming the video. The first attempt, I struggled because the instructions I had, well, firstly, the kit doesn't come with instructions, so it's worth bearing in mind. I think that is a little bit of an oversight from Wilwood, but that's neither here nor there. And the instructions I did find weren't quite specifically for this kit, so I did struggle. And then I had to experiment with a few things a few days later, and now I've got a better understanding of what I'm doing. But anyway, yes, 4-piston calipers. To go in them, I have Wilwood's BP10 pads, which I would describe as a fast road pad. You probably could do a track day on them, but you want a more aggressive compound for doing such things. And of course, that leaves the discs. You have to bear with me, the compressor has fired up on my left-hand side. So the discs I have are actually from another MX-5, albeit a Mark 4. So these are 280 millimeters in diameter, whereas the standard discs are, from memory, 251, I believe. So bigger discs, so you've got a larger surface area, which will help with efficiency and of course heat management, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing this. Speaking of heat management, some of you may be crying out to me or asking me, are you going to be doing any ducting? At this stage, no. This was an unexpected expense. I didn't really want to spend much more, bearing in mind I've had to buy new wheels to fit over the new brake calipers. I did buy spacers, but the last time I had spacers fitted to the MX-5, I wasn't a big fan. So I thought, you know what, let me just buy wheels that actually fit, as opposed to trying to adapt my existing wheels. So sadly, this will be the last time you will see gold wheels on Monique. So just have a moment of silence. Actually, I was going to say moment of silence, but that's pointless because the compressor is screaming its heart out. So yes, I've got bigger discs, bigger calipers, more pistons. So without further ado, I think it's time to stop waffling on. Actually, before I do get on with it, for those of you that haven't seen my more recent videos, this is what is left of my front pads for my last track day. These were Rodisons, which they are highly regarded but I would say they're better suited for cars that are naturally aspirated. So that pad is pretty beaten up, but still got a bit of meat left on it. I know it's not quite in focus, but you can probably get the idea. There we go, that's better. Again, this pad is not looking too shabby. Get it in focus. There we go. That pad is perhaps a bit lower. Again, get it in focus. And I leave you with this one. I mean, that's not a pad anymore, is it? That's just a backing plate. So that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this upgrade, because yeah, needless to say, the OEM setup, yeah, it's not quite cutting the mustard, is it? So of course, the first thing we need to do is to take off the OEM caliper and the carrier as well. So you've got one of two ways of doing this. You can either remove the caliper separately, then remove the carrier or the bracket or the mount, whichever phrasing you want to use, or you can do what I'm going to do, and that's to take off the entire unit in one hit. It just saves a bit of time, and given the fact we're not refitting it, it just makes sense in my eyes to take the whole thing off as one. Right. The new kit comes with new brake lines because these ones I have already, A, they're not compatible with the new caliper, and B, yeah, they're in quite a bad way, so I wouldn't recommend reusing them anyway, because they've been rubbing on the inside of the tyres on the track days. And this near side front isn't too bad, but the offside front, yeah, it's in quite a bad way. So that's one of the other reasons why upgrading to this kit, because I needed new brake lines anyway. And I thought, well, to save paying out for a new set of brake lines, this kit comes with a new set anyway, so gives you a bit more value for money. Well, it just made it a bit more cost effective for me. Now, best practice is to get a caliper S-hook and to hang it off the spring. To be fair, there's quite a lot of surface area on the wishbone, so I'm quite happy just propping it on the wishbone. It's not really going to go anywhere. Yeah, that's not going to budge. So good idea to clean up these surfaces. Because I've had the kit on and off so many times, this has already been done, so I don't need to worry about that as such. I can see that the mating surfaces are clean and free of debris. Now this is where things get a little bit interesting for yours truly, because when you follow the kit, now I've got one of the caliper brackets mounts here. Probably hear me undoing the packaging. Oh, so it gets mounted like so. So you have the bolts going in through there, then you have a black spacer, which you'll see in a few moments. But what I found in my experience is this wasn't bringing the caliper outboard enough to allow both pads to fit in. The inner pad would go in, but the outer pad wouldn't. So as you can see, there's a lot of clearance on that side, but that side, look, you see? Yeah, I mean, you should be able to see it, it's pretty obvious. And I can't, as you can see, that is a struggle. If I just show you the pads, so inner pad, lovely, lovely, but the outer pad, that is never going in a month of Sundays, even with a hammer.
Now that's what I'm talking about. How to build a car. It's broken.
So I've kind of had to adapt the kit to my needs, which you may need to do, you may not need to do. I did put it out on Facebook groups, and one or two people, including Boffy Racing, said that perhaps that my hubs, one of my hubs, may have moved more outboard. But given the fact I've had the same problem on both sides, I would argue that's unlikely. I've tested for any play in the bearing, and everything seems to be okay. So I'm now going to get the bolts. Now the kit comes with shims, and the idea is that you put the shims between the mount and the caliper. But I found in my experience when I did that, it was bringing the caliper more inboard, and therefore it was making my problems of getting the pads in even worse. So I'll show you what I've done. I've had to be a little bit cunning, and I've also sought advice from one of the mechanics here, just to make sure that what my solution was efficient and above all safe, because you don't want to muck about with brakes. Bolt and one spacer, like so, just to show both cameras. Slip it through the top. Then I want to do the same again. Now, it's worth noting, these bolts are not the ones supplied with the kit, and I'll explain a little bit why in a few moments. But these bolts are right. They are exactly the same as what's in the kit. They're just longer. And then I now want this black plastic spacer that comes in the kit. And then my solution. So these shims would normally go, as I've said, between the mount and the caliper, but instead I'm putting them between the hub or the upright, if that's what you call it. I'm now putting them between the hub and the mount. Right, these should be at 17, no, yes they are 17mm, but I haven't got my 17mm fitted. Right, so they are at 17mm. Now, Wilwood advised to use Loctite on these, but do a test fit to make sure everything is okay before you do it, because once the Loctite has set, you're going to have a bit of a headache trying to undo it, especially if you're using red Loctite, which is a more permanent application. Now you need to make sure that the more cutout side of the you need to make sure the cutout side of the mount is facing towards the inside of the car, so that what you're left with is a more flat surface facing outside the car. Now, the reason why I've used longer bolts is because the horn works. The reason why I've been advised to use longer bolts is, I'll show you in a minute actually. Right, just make sure they're not protruding too much. In fact, that's actually a little bit uneven, so I'll need to address that. If I take you off this camera, you'll see that the longer bolt, when it's in focus, is virtually flush with the mount. That one isn't, it's protruding a bit, so I need to look into it. I think one of the shims may be a little bit flatter than one of the others. If I were to use the original bolt supplied with the kit, using this solution of using shims here, the bolt wasn't long enough to be secured properly. Another thing worth noting, when you've got the new discs on, they are larger in diameter. Therefore, you will either need to remove the OEM heat shield or bend it, manipulate it in a way where it's not fouling on the disc, because yeah, it's going to damage the disc and it's going to cause an awful screeching, grinding noise as you're going along. So as you can see, the mount is now fitted, and that means fitting a caliper. Right, so these calipers aren't handed, they're interchangeable, so it's not a case of this has to be for the near side or the off side. You can swap them around as you so desire. That's one of the other things I thought I was missing when I was fitting the kit previously. I thought I was trying to fit an offside to the near side and vice versa. Now I've just spotted, obviously I need a disc. So this is normally where you'd use the shims, but I found when I was doing that, it was just making my life a bit of a misery because I couldn't get anything to line up. Now, as you will hopefully see in a minute, my solution means that the disc or the rotor, again if you're watching this in the US of A, should be more central. So just having a quick look, I know my head's in the way of that camera, but it will need to be just momentarily. Right, so I believe I want a 14mm. I think the caliper is now a bit too outboard, which I must confess it's the first time I've had this problem. So what I'm going to do is, so this is why I'm not Loctiting it, because if I had have done, I would have been in a bit of trouble now. So just crack that off. So I've now got some washers to kind of counteract everything. Let's brought the caliper to inboard. So those washers, they're too thick. So there's more trial and error than I would have liked with this kit, to be honest. So we'll see if I can find any thinner washers. Okay, so another solution, possible solution, is to take the shims out between the hub and the mount, fit a washer in there instead, and then use the shims for the to go between the mount and the caliper. So let's give that a go. Right, that was a bit of a kerfuffle, but we got there. So I've got one of the trained technicians to have a look at it to make sure it's correct and safe, because these are brakes, they need to be safe, both for me and for other road users and pedestrians, etc. Yeah, he's happy with it. I don't think I'm going to get this any more centered than I can. So in case you've been trying to fit this kit, you've had the same problem as me, I'll speak through what I've done. So for the mount, the mount that goes into the hub, I've used a longer bolt. It's the same bolt as what supplies, so it's got the same pitch thread and so forth. It's just longer. I've used the spacer, so the washer that came with the kit, the black spacer that came with the kit, but I've also had to use a washer as well, which we have plenty of in the workshop. So I will show you what the washer looks like, bear with. So it was one of these washers, which is an M10, if I'm not mistaken. So I've had to fit one at the top, one at the bottom, and the reason for that is it allows the caliper to come outboard enough in order to A, get the disc, the rotor, centered, and also to allow me to fit the outer pad. I've used the smaller bolts that came with the kit. I've not needed to do anything with them. That's compressor again. So they are fitted there with the washer, as you can see, and I've got these shims in between. So yes, a bit of a debacle, but we got there. So what I'm now going to do is take these pads out. Right, so I'm trying to apply some grease to the pads. By the way, guys, if you like this t-shirt, I got this from carfectionery.com. Head over to their store. At the time of filming, their store is offline, but by the time this video is live to watch and you're watching this now, hopefully their online shop would have reopened. Yeah, they do lots of great designs, good quality, and they also do some MX-5 designs as well. So yeah, be sure to show them a bit of love. Actually, before I do that, I'm now at a point where I can Loctite everything. So I'm going to use medium strength for the bolts that go between the mount and the carrier. I think Wilwood used to say use red Loctite, but the caliper will need to come off to replace the disc, and I don't want any faff. But for the bolts that go between the hub and the bracket, I'll use the red Loctite. Once I was happy with this, these bolts were torqued to 40 Newton meters. The bolts for the caliper were torqued at 54 Newton meters. Once the pads had been greased and slid into the caliper, it was time to fit the cotter pin, also referred to as a split pin. time to fit the new brake line, which you will need a 12mm spanner for when fitting the line to the caliper. Removing the old brake line from the hard line was a challenge, required lubrication and heat for extra encouragement. This wasn't really caught well on camera as me and a technician were standing in the way, so apologies I can't show you that. For the hard line, we needed a 17mm spanner and a 10mm flare spanner. I then test fitted the wheel to make sure there were no clearance or fouling issues on the brake line to avoid what had happened last time. Once I was happy with that, of course it was time to do the same on the other side. I was hoping to replace the rear pads and discs, but a certain parts supplier that still remained unnamed stitched me up, the same supplier that let me down on the front pads on Leo, my Leon Cupra. As you can probably see, the rear discs sent for Monique were too small compared to the old discs, so that is a job that will need to wait for another time. I did, however, carry out what felt like the millionth oil and filter change I've done in the last year or so. Everything was going swimmingly, but when it came to bleeding the brakes, there was an issue which I will explain later in the video. As you can see though, I was able to bleed the brakes eventually, and then I gave Monique a quick road test to make sure everything was okay and safe. Oh. 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 We're there. We're done. Oh man. Oh. So that was a bit of a debacle. So just to summarise my challenges today. So the hard lines, they were pretty seized up, and both of them needed a heat and a bit of lubrication to get them to be a bit more forthcoming. So yeah, fitting the new brake lines was a little bit difficult, to say the least, and I did need help with that. And then when it came to bleeding it, what I didn't realise is that because of course Wilwood is an American company, the bleed nipples on the calipers, they are imperial, not metric. So for us in the UK, that poses a bit of a problem, because at the garage all we have is metric spanners, because we don't need imperial stuff. Luckily I actually have, oh it's in the garage, it's off camera, but I have an old combination spanner set that I've had for years. I think I bought it from Moss Europe, I believe. It was so long ago I can't remember, and within that I had some imperial spanners, and that has saved the day, because that's a spanner set I haven't used in ages, but I thought I won't get rid of it because I might need it one day, and I was flipping correct. So yes, the brakes have been bled. I still think there's a bit more firmness to be had through the pedal. Of course the pads need to bed into the discs, and I think a more thorough brake fluid change will most likely be needed. I just wanted to do some form of change just to get the car up and running, so she's ready to go for the MX-5 National Rally tomorrow. Yeah, the brakes feel a lot better than they did when I finished the job earlier, because yeah, there was pretty much no brakes there whatsoever. Now thankfully I live very close to the workshop, so I was able to limp Monique home, because we only get so much time in the workshop on a Saturday and I'd run out of time. So yeah, I was able to do the brake fluid change here. Well, just the front calipers actually bled to the rears 1 or 2 weeks back. And yes, I must confess it was more work than I would have anticipated, but the important thing is we got there. So I do hope you have learnt something from this video, as much as it isn't a how-to guide. I think there may be some of you fellow MX-5 owners that may have struggled with this kit and may have had the same problem with me. Now when I did the work, I didn't really have much reference to work on. The instructions, or the best instructions I could find, still wasn't really for this particular kit, and I wish I'd known in advance. Maybe that's my fault for not doing enough research, but I just assumed that the bleed nipples would be metric, whether they be 6, 7 or 8 millimeters, something quite generic and standard, but no, they had to be imperial. Thank you, America. Anyway, it really is time for me to wrap up, because I've been at this longer than I would have wanted today, and I'm sure my wife and my daughter are wondering if I've got lost somewhere. No, not wondering, they're probably hoping I've got lost somewhere. So yes, I do hope you have enjoyed this video or found it useful. Again, a big thank you to Boffy Racing. If you have enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. If you are subscribed, don't forget to click the bell icon so you get notified every time I make a video. But until the next time guys, be sure to keep up the car obsession.